Okay, all right. Let's convene the select board meeting for the town of Hanover for Monday, March 10th. There is no public hearing. Agenda review. Are there select board members might wish to reorder? Seeing none, let's move on to announcements recognition. I believe we did that last time, or there are no announcements at this time. Is that correct, Rob?
Correct.
Yep. Okay. All right. Public comment. This is the period of the agenda when the public is welcome to address the select board. We ask that one addresses issues not already scheduled on the agenda. We ask that individuals restrict their comments to 5 minutes. Questions will be directed to the chair. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment at this time? Please indicate your address and name. Thank you.
David Vincelette, 93 Lebanon Street in Hanover. Come before you again. With some action from this board to look into allegations of criminal action by the town. I've got a narrative from Lieutenant Michael G. Scabola, who did an investigation of my complaint that my driveway had been illegally blocked. In the criminal allegations, he stated, Mr. Vincelette alleges the following RSA violations under 633(2). Charge of restraint of freedom for a felony requires exposing the victim to risk of serious bodily injury. In my case, when they closed the fence, they restricted our ability to get emergency vehicles. Mr. Vincelette stated due to the town's actions, emergency medical services or fire services were prohibited from getting vehicle access to his home. He also stated that the lack of vehicle access prohibited him from getting required medical treatment. For our RSA 633(2), the confinement can include being done by force, threat, or deception. In my case, it was done by force. I was arrested and taken to jail while the town took over at my property and then put up a fence after they had taken my property. As the courts have ruled that the fencing by the town was lawful, in that it divided my land from the town's land. The court eventually allowed Mr. Vincelette to make the decision as to which access driveway he wished to have blocked on tract 1 or tract 2. Mr. Vincelette, through the civil court process, was able to get the fence removed, allowing him vehicular access. Excuse me. So through the civil court process, I was able to get the fence removed, allowing the vehicular access closer to my residential property. Based on a review of any applicable RSAs of a criminal nature, the issue appears to be moot since the courts on several levels were involved in this matter. But nobody has ever looked at the fact that my driveway was totally blocked in violation of Constitution. Mr. Vincelette can certainly be correct that his personal life was greatly inconvenienced by the lack of an accessible driveway. So he found that I had an inaccessible driveway. While he alleges that emergency vehicles could not access his driveway to his house, they could appear to get within 150 yards to his house when the fence was up. So I was expected to walk 150 yards on a bad hip while I was awaiting surgery. And even then, after the 150 yards, I would have hit the fence. As such, he could not find any criminal charge in this matter. However, as discussed with Mr. Vincelette, I agreed to have this report sent to the Grafton County Attorney's Office in order for a third-party review of the matter for any criminal charges. Once again, Mr. Houseman has sent me a letter this week, and in it, he tries to explain away the driveway blockage, but the driveway blockage is a problem that Mr. Houseman has created. And and he could very easily clear up this whole matter if he would just admit what he has done. Did you or did you not fence my driveway on November 9th, 2016? That's the question. November 9th, 2016. It's in the filings.
So they go through the filings. So as I understand it from reading the filings, passage was made so that there was access on the road to get.
There was a driveway open to a third lot. It has nothing to do with my property. I live at 93 11th Street, as I told you at the beginning when I came in here. There's only one driveway on 93 11th Street. It goes directly to my house. Any fool could find it. The fact that Mr. Hausman pretends he doesn't know is just mere foolishness. You can stand right at the end of my driveway and see my house right there. There's no mistaking it. Mr. Hausman deliberately and maliciously put up a fence across my driveway. It's noted by the person who did the inspection. And is that my time?
It is, but you can finish.
Well, I'd like to, I mean, Mr. Hausman came to my property on December 21st, 2018, and opened up my fence. I have it on videotape. Now, hard for me to understand how he doesn't know he blocked my driveway, and when he came down and opened it up for me 7 years ago, he still hasn't realized it's my driveway. Something wrong here. I think we should say the Pledge of Allegiance is what I found. You all don't seem to realize that what you've done to an individual citizen. There's supposed to be liberty and justice for all of us. And I was denied liberty for 2 years, over 2 years. My family was denied their liberty, and this institution won't even look into it, won't even ask questions. You promoted a man who's a disgusting criminal. You promoted him to become the town manager, and he still refuses to answer questions about how he held people hostage, violation of their constitutional rights. How can you all let him sit there?
Unless there are other public comments, let's move on to business requiring discussion. And we'll turn it over to Rob and Ellen for discussion of the budget. And Ellen, thank you for all your various schedules. And Jane, also for your memorandum from this afternoon with respect to highlighting the changes from last time. Thank you. Very helpful.
You're welcome. And, I thought, thinking about how we might walk through this, we'll take a quick look at the summary chart, and then I can walk through the changes that were made since the department level reviews that we went through. And then I think what I'll probably do is allow you to ask questions. I have a couple of different schedules, and a couple of the changes. Certainly the largest material changes are some of the use of undesignated fund balance and the increase in contributions to capital reserve funds. So I have to admit, I'm going to take 1 minute because one of the schedules I didn't open up is the undesignated fund balance. I'll open that now before I share. So this is a little bit of the extra juggling of balls. So give me a minute.
No worries. Same time. Choose.
In order to use this room and to display online through JAM, we've launched a Zoom meeting so that they can pick up the live feed of the screen share. This is not a hybrid meeting. It's still going across the feed as it would on JAM. It's just adds a level of steps for Ellen, so. Want to acknowledge that the Zoom room is complete as of Friday. We did use it on Tuesday. And the mics that are now being used are these two flying saucer discs in the ceiling, which are very sensitive. And apparently the sound quality is decent, Nick. The one problem with this room is that we can't put amplification in here. So we will start to use those hearing assist devices that we own, offering them to individuals who have hearing issues in this room.
Are you really close to that corner?
I am, but I know it's there.
Maybe one of those bumper things.
Cool.
For kids.
Yeah.
Big enough that you don't have to turn it around. if you
Yeah,
want.
it's fine.
I'm worried about you.
Yeah,
Oh, no, I touched it.
there we go.
And we need a bigger monitor. Can you get a bigger-
Not if it's in the budget.
I just wanted to, this is your ARPA funds hard at work. Thank you for allowing me to do this.
Thank you.
Okay. So just as a starting point, this is the summary chart that I included in the memo that went out on Friday. And it does give us an overview of all the different funds and taking a look at the revenues and appropriations and then the change from fiscal year 25. I think one thing to note is that you know, the fact that the general fund is going up by 10.6% kind of jumps out, but do remember that that includes this additional use of undesignated fund balance of $1.8 million. So that definitely skews that view. I'd like to just switch over to the memo that I sent this afternoon. And I will also get this, we'll post it, but also get it out to the Finance Committee. And this is just really a summary of the changes that are included in this version of the consolidated budget. Again, just sort of starting out, going to the punchline first, even with the changes that were made to the general fund, net, it was about an $8,000 increase in appropriations. And so the tax rate remains at $4.88 for the municipal tax rate. It's a 5.3% increase over tax year 2024. The changes that were made in this version is Rob changed the contingency fund from 25,000 to 100,000. In my original version of the general fund budget, I did have as a placeholder the allocation of general admin from the general fund to the other funds. And that was from 2025. When I went through the actual allocations, we used formulas that allocation out went to 769. I have to say that the budgets that were presented by the other funds did already include those additional allocations. So it actually was an upside for the general fund. And then probably, of course, the biggest change was what Rob and I are putting forward as a use of the fund balance. And the most significant piece is that $1.5 million deposit to the Building Maintenance and Repair Capital Reserve Fund. That's really in recognition of the fact that we have, are likely to have significant investments to make in our buildings.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. As you're aware, we've hired AG Architects to do an assessment of our capital buildings or our buildings, and that report is due in May. We've had the opportunity to meet in person and discuss some of the findings to date, and I'm trying to signal with this that we're expecting some costs down the road here.
And this is really the creation of the building reserve fund because we don't have one.
We do have one.
Oh, we do.
We do. And I'll flip over to, we'll take a look at, I've put together a chart with basically the balances in the capital reserve funds, the deposits to those funds or transfers to those funds that the CIPC had recommended, and layering on these additional items. So you'll see some additional transfers to the capital reserve funds, both in the general fund and then also in the water and sewer funds, knowing that we have the debt coming online.
If I'm understanding correctly, so the contingency is part of the general fund now.
It is, and
So it went
yes,
from 25 to 100 and it's within this.
correct, it is. The other two items, yes, the other two items sort of compensated from the undesignated fund balance. One is the contingency fund, and then 200,000 for the phase one of the scanning of the planning and zoning documents. The other change that we made was to increase the overlay to set aside for potential abatements. At least in my tenure, we've tended to budget that at $100,000. And in recognition of the revaluation that's coming, we thought it was prudent to increase that set aside.
Is that enough?
It's a fair question. Assessing this, we are meeting regularly to make sure that we feel we're on firm ground with the reval and are being cautiously optimistic that this is enough.
And we will see when we go through the undesignated fund balance. I have calculated the fund balance, and with this usage, we still remain above 15%. So it's still within the guidelines. But I do think it's a potential for a strategy conversation. You know, how much of that undesignated fund balance we do basically set aside for the buildings. Once it's in the capital reserve fund, it would take a vote at town meeting to pull it back out. So just to note that. For the fire fund, we didn't make any material changes. For the water fund, I worked with Christina and Peter, really looking at forecasting the debt that will be coming online and wanting to really implement the process of increasing our revenues above the balancing of the fund, and then taking that additional revenue and depositing it into the capital reserve fund. So the changes that were made to the budget that you initially reviewed was we did increase usage fees by an additional 4%. That generates about $78,000. And then I also layered in the second phase of the American water, what is it? Waste, darn, I looked it up. It's the Association for basically water and wastewater management. And they had put together a phased approach that they recommended that basically effectively does save for future investments. And so we had laid out a 10-year plan. And this is, we implemented the initial phase last year, and this is the second phase. Those increases do generate another $95,000. Those are increases to the quarterly base fees for water users. Now, the initial year increase really captured the great majority of the meters. And so a lot of homeowner users will not see an increase from this. I will follow up at our formal budget approval meetings. I will come and let you know what these increases will mean to an average household. I didn't have a chance to calculate that for today.
So how's the base fee different? Is it different than the meter
The meter is the base fee.
Yeah.
And it's based on the size of the meter.
So is it based on usage or is it a separate?
It's a
connection
separate,
fee?
it's,
So what's the rationale for using the quarterly base fee as opposed to the usage fee?
usage is going down. People are becoming more efficient with their water and the base fee is constant.
And I'll also say that, so the water bill that you get has the quarterly base fee plus your usage fee. So we have a usage fee as well as the quarterly base.
So it's a fixed and a variable piece.
Correct.
Yeah.
And about 4%, you said that.
It is a 4%.
4% increase.
For the sewer fund, we took a similar approach. In this case, we did increase an additional 4% on the sewer fund. That's generating $120,000. That increase will apply not only to Hanover users, but also our Lebanon partners. So that has a big impact. And then we also are proposing use of fund balance of $500,000 to basically shift from the undesignated fund balance into the capital reserve, again, to prepare for the debt payments.
The sewer fund.
Correct. Did I say?
I just want to make sure everybody understands the sewer fund has an undesignated fund balance in addition to the general fund. We're talking, yeah.
Yes, each of the funds have their own undesignated fund balance.
The work that we're doing at the sewer treatment plant, does that increase capacity or basically there's no investment here that's going to have a return?
It brings us into compliance with the EPA requirements for nitrogen and phosphorus. And it allows us to operate more efficiently and to improve the work environment for those who went to the site. I think you can appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just,
I mean,
Does
in
it create
terms of,
capacity?
it doesn't create capacity, but if we don't do it, it might cost us money because we could be fined.
yeah, I get it. I'm just,
And there is 30% of our total capacity being allocated to Lebanon currently.
right.
And we have the ability to pull that back with a year's notice.
That was fun.
It's 1 year.
My understanding too is that when it comes to septage, so like pumping, like trucks that pump septic systems, they have a limited capacity.
They do. And it's because it lacks the liquid or water content.
Because we're so efficient with our water.
Well, septic come in very thick and our treatment plant is handling, we could use some water in the system.
And Ellen, even with the 500,000 contemplated transfer to the CRF, there's plenty of room, it looks like, on the undesignated fund balance.
There is, and we'll see that there's, there could be excess capacity to move it over, but for now, proposing this. For the ambulance fund, we didn't make any changes. And in the parking fund, we did make 2 changes. On the appropriation side, we did add $60,000 for a parking system study. And in order to balance the fund, we did add about a 3% rate increase on the fines, the fees, the permits. And that will be, a conversation as far as exactly how that's applied, and that will be built into the rates and fees schedule.
And we are in discussions with the downtown business group about tiered pricing and graduated pricing. We believe we could capture that increase in that graduated pricing approach. I put this in here to address the concerns that have been raised and figure out how we can better manage our parking system, be more responsive to the business community, especially given the hiccups that we're going to see in the next 2+ years of construction with Thompson Lot coming offline and some other impacts. So I know that the downtown business group is trying to look at ways to be creative, and here's an opportunity to present to the select board options.
Well, I know we do the rates and fees after town meeting. Is that when we discuss this more? Or
You'll receive an ordinance change where we can propose certain zones in our parking system that can go to this graduated fee structure. The idea being that if you would like to stay, you would pay increasingly more for an hourly rate. But we also are trying to balance that with how we create the necessary turnover to keep a vibrant downtown so that people who can afford to just park and stay aren't taking advantage of the system.
Yeah. I notice a lot of construction workers parking in our 10-hour school street. I'm sure you've noticed too. But I think a lot of it, like, so we'll be discussing like balancing out
Yeah.
the rates and fees across the different zones.
Yes.
Post. Then is the town, the time to
Yes.
discuss it, and we're sort of set up to have that discussion. We can fine tune any adjustments then.
Yes, we are. That's correct. We've reached out to our vendors to see how hard it would be to make these changes. The mobile apps are easy to deploy this, and the kiosk can easily deploy this graduated rate structure. So
Yeah, and some of it is like, you know, it's cheaper to park on School Street than it is to park in the garage and
Yep.
stuff like that.
Okay, so we are implicitly endorsing the study through this. That's fine. The questions on the study?
Allowing for it.
That's the 85,000, or is it the
60,000.
60,000.
Yeah.
But then there's 85,000, or I'm sorry, there's 103,000 in the parking system and garage consulting. Is that,
The fund balance?
no,
No, it's
So the
in a
parking budget.
separate
the
account.
parking fund?
That was for the, correct me if I'm wrong, they looked at the actual facility of the garage and they schedule out what types of repairs may or may not need to be
So
done.
there are two phases. The first phase was appropriated in 03 or 02 or 2022, about 500,000. That project is about to go out to bid. It was stalled, and we now know that we need to move forward so that we can prevent the continued deterioration of the building. And then the second phase is coming up that needs to be addressed. That's the stair towers and other improvements that were not part of the original project.
Sorry.
But that's not part of the changes. That was.
Right. I'm sorry, so I'm looking in the packet, in the fund 2026 Hanover parking fund budget. We have $103,000 for consulting.
So yes, that is part, that would be consolidated.
153 in total.
Down there, just a minute.
Aggressive percent increases.
Yes.
Well, ambulance fund isn't gonna help us, is it?
Yeah, there you go.
Correct, so the 60,000 is included in the 103. I would normally go into my Excel sheets and everything just to take a look, but yes, that is a consolidated.
there was already 43,000 planned, but now we're saying it's gonna be 103.
Well, I'll get clarification for you, make sure I didn't miss and double count something.
Yeah, I've taken a note that we need to double check the consulting and come back and either confirm
Or deny.
or deny. So we will take a look at that. It's a question.
And the parking fund is in sufficiently good shape that we're drawing 84,000 from fund balance.
So we are, and it does, I can flip over to the fund balance if that would be helpful. So it does leave us in the parking fund. With an basically 8% balance. Again, the select board guidelines are 5% for all the funds other than general and fire.
But it wasn't too many years ago, we were in the red in this fund. So, yeah, right?
I agree. And I think a couple things for the parking fund. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done on the parking fund. And so I think that as we look at the different structures for rates, certainly I think it's a fair point that drawing 84,000 from the undesignated fund balance is not going to be sustainable. But probably as part of the bigger picture, figuring out how to make the fund sustainable.
$311,500 for a credit card and banking fees.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Do we need to consider higher rates now? Like, do we have, I guess that was my question before, is like, when do we have this discussion? Right, because if we wait to have the discussion until after the budget, then we end up feeling kind of distracted or attached to these numbers.
So from my perspective, this budget for 26 stands on its own and is supported by the revenue streams we're projecting. And it gives us the chance to get the data from an expert to guide us on how we manage this in a stepped approach, not unlike what we do with water and wastewater. We produce a rate fee structure study that we can demonstrate what we're trying to accomplish and present that to you and to the public to defend the decisions we're making. So my approach would be to move forward with this budget and to include that study so we can get the information and present it to you,
And then that would
guide us in
guide
26.
us so that we're not, you know,
Yeah.
relying on shifting stuff out of the.
Correct. And the debt service on the garage is 2029.
Correct.
So we lose, the bond payment expires in 2029.
So that we can afford to upkeep the building.
Why does the debt service go up? So, I don't mean to,
No, go ahead.
I don't mean to
It's fine.
like derail the meeting.
No, it's fine.
Get into the minutia here.
That's
but-
fair question.
So let me go over to, so, second. So the debt service is going up compared to the budget. But I believe that the budget was understated for last year. So I can pull up the amortization schedule. This is straight from the amortization schedule, so this is what it will be for 26. The rate isn't changing.
Gotcha.
And then
Yes, yeah.
So we, if I remember correctly, and App was helping here, we never really carried a contingency in the budget. Like, there wasn't a line item for contingency until a couple years ago. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And that a couple years ago, we put like 10,000 or maybe 20,000 in a contingency fund, so we could, deal with unanticipated. And we were all like, whoa, okay. We're going from 25,000 to 100,000, and I just am wondering what kind of safeguards we have on how that money is spent.
It's a fair question, and I must admit that I increased the contingency because I was truly concerned that I've cut too close to the bone, if you will, and wanted some flexibility. The example is I'm not prepared to sign a contract or recommend the pay and comp study yet, but I would like to have that in the ready to launch this time next year, so it's done in time for union negotiations. And I'm not sure what that price will be. I know what it is today. It's about $33,000, and it will give us it'll give us a very comprehensive analysis of the compensation and pay class that we will need to get through the union negotiations that we owe all of our employees.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my feeling is, given the times, I'm not worried about, I think $100,000 is probably wise to have as a contingency, I guess, in terms of safeguards on how it's spent, you know, that you're not having like extraordinary lunches or whatever. I mean, I don't know. Not that I would, yeah, I guess that's just a lot of play money is.
Duly
And
noted.
so, you know, when it's to be spent, that perhaps the select board hear about it.
Sure. I mean, we can put it in, I'm comfortable with.
So like if you're gonna spend 35,000 on the study, fine, if there's something else that comes in, just, you know. Executive council requires any contract greater than $9,999 to be reviewed. I don't think that we need to do that, but I think that it's important as.
Duly noted.
Okay, thanks.
And appreciate that guidance.
As we move toward quarterly financial reviews, we'll be going through line item by line item, and then also individually, we recently had the pleasure.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Going through the payments made.
Pleasure.
And I went back this afternoon and looked through this presentation, and he flagged about 135,000 of tariff impacts, and that was on operating costs. It was chemicals for water and wastewater, and then mostly asphalt. There are a few other things, but so that's 135,000 that's not in the budget. And then you've got the potential effect of tariffs on capital items, which is probably a bigger number, I'm guessing, just, vehicles. Could be a lot. So.
We would say it's mostly chemicals and then,
Sorry.
yeah, mostly chemicals and asphalt.
But I went back, that's all operating.
Yeah,
So.
we asked him about capital though, and he said that he anticipated based on what had already come out, particularly because we buy a lot of stuff from Canada, that it was mostly chemical, like it was, he said those operating numbers, we can go back and, or you just ask him, but he wasn't as concerned about the capital,
And,
even though they can.
Oh, I bet John had a question.
so, yes, I'd like to recognize Sean Dahl and Greg Snyder here from the Finance Committee. Thank you both for attending. You should feel free to jump in at any point if you have questions, but.
We can revisit that and report back for the next meeting.
And it gets to your question on flexibility though. So do we want to maybe talk about the general fund changes, which are the biggest numbers? Use of undesignated fund balance, the $1.5 million.
Can you share that, explain that too?
So I think, maybe you want me to walk through this and discuss, I think what is really helpful is I put up the undesignated fund balance reconciliation for the general fund. And again, you'll see the uses that we had just walked through. It does leave us with a just under 17% undesignated fund balance. Again, based on the facility study, this was the recommendation that we're making.
it's the pending facility study and what we know on the recommissioning of the how that's sitting out there.
And the retaining wall.
And the retaining. Yes, yes. So,
Our policy is 10 to 15,
yes,
so we're still close to 2% off.
yes. Ellen and I discussed that, and given the times, we thought that was appropriate.
And maybe for the benefit of the finance committee members who are here and our extensive viewing public, Ellen, maybe can you back up and say, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we're considering these actions? And how did we get to the $5 million undesignated fund balance?
Sure, I think really the biggest drivers of the improved balance in the undesignated fund balance really came from our fiscal year 24 performance, driven by two items, really the increase over what we budgeted for the meals and rooms tax that came in from the state. And then in addition, a very significant portion coming in from our short-term interest. When I went through the 24 budget, particularly for short-term interest, very conservative, kind of looking at the trends, and we did budget that at $250,000 in the original budget, and we came in over $900,000. So that was a significant contribution to the undesignated fund balance. And again, with so much uncertainty for fiscal year 25, we budgeted $600,000 again. We will definitely overachieve that. We do invest our free cash through a specific sort of municipal savings instrument that Mascoma gives us access to. We have been earning just over 5% on that. As of March 1st, it is backing off to 4.5%, which still I felt was very competitive. And so really our performance in short-term interest is one because of the rates, but also because our treasurer every day makes a concerted effort to analyze our cash needs and sweeps any additional free cash so that it is productive. So again, in fiscal year 25, I feel that we will have some additional benefit from that. And I think that fiscal year 26 is budgeted conservatively. But so that really, again, circling back, that's what drove really the benefit to the undesignated fund balance.
So you're indicating $1.5 million for the building capital reserve fund, and I guess you had put on the table flexibility. I guess it gets to and you mentioned how library, there may or may not be additional tariff impacts on capital items. We should take a look at that. And also the Park Guadano study. So I guess the question is maybe the confidence level that money is needed, there's a home for it, and should we think about taking a portion of that and maybe retaining higher in undesignated fund balance, and then could we use that for other capital funds if needed? It would have to be just for general fund though, right? So
Correct,
Yeah.
just for general funds, and we certainly could use it for capital items. It would have to be, for instance, if we left a portion of it in the undesignated fund balance for the fiscal year 26 budget, it would be until the 27 budget that we could move it from undesignated fund balance into either capital reserve fund or usage as we see here. Barring a natural disaster or unexpected event where we could have, I don't know whether it takes a special town meeting or we can have access to the undesignated fund balance in an emergency, but for anticipated expenses, we wouldn't have access to it until a future budget year.
So
Right. kind of bring this in a different direction. So this will be the third year that we have a tax increase that exceeds inflation by a pretty significant amount. So last year, or I'm sorry, this year, we're assuming 3% inflation, 6.7% tax increase. 4% inflation last year, 4.1, 6.5% last year. 22, we had 8% inflation, only 3.5% increase. But can we keep this budget or this increase in tax at inflation instead of taking money from the general fund and putting it towards the building fund?
If you're asking, can we buy down the tax burden? It hits us harder next year because we'll either need to draw it down again to cover that gap or have a bigger increase in the tax burden next year.
Or cut expenses.
And that's a conversation. I'm trying to remember what the percent of our expenses are, direct employee costs. And I think we can do that deep dive, but not in the window we have for town meeting. I look at what we have for staffing compared to like-sized community, and I would say that we are on the thin side of things for staffing levels.
It remind us, so right now, there is some budgeted small amount of use of undesignated fund balance, is that right? Or is there zero?
No, it's about $73,000, but those are for the funds where we allocate from prior year land use change fee taxes, as well as the $5 motor vehicle fee that we collect. So we are allocating funds that were received in fiscal year 24 into fiscal year 26. So.
Do you think that's sufficient for the building fund, given, or should we be putting more in there? Like, I mean, I've just been sitting on the capital improvement program committee where we went through how we haven't really saved for these building improvements that we knew were coming, not just, I mean, specifically at the how. And
So when Ellen and I met, and I threw this note, I didn't throw it out there, I gave it thought, but it was what's appropriate to start a solid investment in our capital facilities funding that will create the opportunity to move forward with larger improvements and upgrades. The AG architect study and those we already know about, like the Hal Library. And this was the number that we thought was appropriate and still provided us with a healthy fund balance above the recommended cap.
yeah, I guess, I might have to walk me through that part though. Can you talk to me more about the recommended cap? Because
The select board has a policy that recommends the fund balance be between 10 and 15%. This is at 16.95. We didn't draw it down to 15 because of the uncertainty and potential headwinds going forward.
so the 15, my understanding was the 15 is sort of that uncertainty, and the 10% was when you're feeling, better. So is it like?
Well, I'll also interject that the Department of Revenue does recommend their guidelines are between 8 and 17. So where our top is a little bit below Department of Revenue Administration.
Their guideline, so just under their guideline.
Yeah.
The federal.
Nope, this is the state
State.
DRA, yeah.
So just under, okay, well. So I mean, to buy down the tax rate, we could do that, but then we're face definitely with a step up next year, and we're using undesignated fund balance for. This is kind of taking them unexpectedly large, and this is a good problem to have, fund balance and saying, we know we're gonna use it, let's salt it away, it's gotta use, it's covered.
But what will the tax increase look like next year? Are we gonna have a fourth year in a row where we're doubling inflation?
In theory, we take a little pressure off because we've now put, 1.5 million into CRF.
Yeah.
And we haven't left ourselves a step that we're gonna have to cover for using fund balance for operations. So we've unplugged from that.
Yeah.
Which in and of itself is kind of an achievement, right? Because how much did we draw on undesignated fund balance in the budget? This year was a lot,
And our budget was 458,000.
458, and we plotted out like a 4-year, by 4 years, we'll be able to get off this, and we've done it in one.
Yeah.
So that's a good place to be.
Just for back of the envelope calculations to buy down the tax rate 1% is about $125,000.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at this, if we were to get this down to match inflation, we're looking at about $400,000 that we have to either shave off the budget or take from someplace else. And I just, like, my position is, I think that many of our constituents are gonna look at another pretty significant tax increase this year after the last two and not be super happy with it.
The other thing in the mix is that with the reappraisal in the second half of the year, it's possible that your multifamily housing is increasingly valuable. So there could be some mix shift, right? That's still impacting taxpayers, but it shifts the loads somewhat.
And it may be helpful. I did put together a calculation based on the school board budgets that were passed and an estimate of our county tax to take a look at the overall blended tax rate. So one of the things to keep in mind is that our municipal tax rate that we're talking about right now is about 26% of the overall tax rate. So the schools, so we only account for 26% of the property tax rate.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah.
Based on, and I will, with the caveat that I did work with Jamie Teague, and I believe that these numbers are correct, but if there's an issue with the school taxes, I own it. And I did just make the assumption, interestingly enough, I used just an inflation rate of 3.5% on the Grafton County. I really don't know what that will be. So without the fire districts, the blended rate this year the total tax rate is $17.68. And this forecast would bring us in at $18.46. That's a 4.4% increase over the previous year. It's 78 cents per thousand. If you say how do you say on average? What's the average home in Hanover? For a long time, we said on $500,000. That doesn't seem adequate. On a $600,000 to $700,000 house, it's $550 or $600 increase. I'm not diminishing that, but that's where we would land with this blended rate where we are.
I do want to make it clear that what we're talking about hits us in the December tax bill. The June or July tax bill is 6 months in arrears. We don't pay for the year in the year we're servicing it.
Right.
So the December bill will be the bill that reflects this.
And with a little mix shift, it's a mix shift. Single family residential could be a little bit less.
We'll be able to present that in July. the reval information. Our hope is to be doing the preliminary meetings in July and August so that we're prepared to issue the bills in a timely fashion.
Thank you for that perspective. So each division of planning documents, this was slated for the Bressett Fund, no longer. Yep, okay.
And again, I thought that the opportunity to do this and keep it moving forward is it's timely, given the current, the soon to be realized space crunch in town hall. We're short at least one desk. I'll speak to it in my town manager report that one of the sustainability coordinator is going to be housed at the Public Works Department. And then once the rental housing inspector's position is filled, we're short a desk. And we're trying to desperately figure out how to address those needs, plus address the work quality in the basement. And so here's the opportunity to have those conversations next year or online. I'll be presenting those to you in the near term.
Questions on that?
If it makes sense, I'll just really quickly, just flipping over again, this is the capital reserve funds where just taking a look by fund, the CIPC recommendation, and then the layering on of the three items, the $1.5 million from the general fund in the building maintenance, and then the additional deposits to the sewer capital reserve fund, which is a combination of $500,000 of fund balance usage from the sewer fund and the additional revenue, and then the additional revenue for the water fund. And just sort of giving you a context, the balance as of 12/31/24 is taking our balances reduced by non-lapsed appropriations. And those appropriations can be open up till 5 years.
Is that part of the package? No.
Nope, I will send this out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this and the tax rate forecast were late breaking.
Yes, okay. Finance committee members, do you have any questions? Comments? Okay. Other aspects of this you'd like to address, Ellen?
Just double check I don't believe so. I think that you know, again, hopefully these documents are giving you a consolidated view that makes it a little bit more digestible. And we'll continue to work on what we're presenting.
Thank you. No, these documents are excellent. Thank you. Yours was really good. Appreciate you. Yes.
And I thank you.
Is there other questions? We will move on.
As a non-numbers guy, it's been great to have Ellen be able to walk me through the details in a way that I can understand. So I'm very
Good partnership.
Good. So I think what I'm hearing, but correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're going to move forward with this as presented. Is that fair to say?
Jared wants to add the tax rate.
So I'm just not like 100% clear on kind of how, you know, all the process, but I know up until now, it's been presentations of proposed budgets. Now we're kind of at this point where it's all together, we're seeing it as a whole. Is there a point where we start looking at what, if there's things that we don't want to fund, or is this that point?
If we're here.
Yes, probably at that point.
When are we planning on voting on the budget?
We're going to set the public hearing tonight. Okay, if the memo can't wait till we get the board doc so I can actually open up.
All this rolling.
Yeah. Set the public hearing on March, actually the next meeting for the budget for April 7th. So the public hearing on the budget is April 7th.
So we have. Let's see.
Actually, the public hearing is the 24th and the backup of the 7th, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you're setting it tonight.
For 2 weeks from tonight.
Yeah.
So we could though, if we so chose, say, you know what, we'd like to consider some changes.
You could,
Do that on the 24th and then have the public meeting on the 7th. So we have the option.
But if there are particular, I mean, wouldn't it make sense to, I mean, if you feel strongly that you wanna drop the tax rate by 1%. Or then our people are here. I mean, I don't think we wanna wait for 2 weeks and have that, well, you know, it'd be nice if we only had, you know, inflation. That wasn't the directive that we gave in December, November. But I mean, if that's how you're feeling, we should talk about it and task these guys with coming back, because I'm not sure that, I guess I don't feel comfortable saying, well, I don't like these 2 things, so can you?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm sorry if I missed that opportunity to set a vision for this earlier on.
This is your first time.
Well, the vision we set was different than we did in previous years.
Yes.
The vision we set was basically just make a budget with zero.
Zero
budget.
base, yeah.
So we didn't give any directive, period.
Correct.
So now is the time, and we have ample time to discuss that.
Jared, may I, sorry to cut you off, Alex. Would it be helpful for you to have a chance to sit with Norm to figure out how this would impact individual properties? Or is it the bigger picture bottom line?
I think it's both. Yeah, I mean, I think, I think I completely understand that having additional mixed-use housing or multifamily housing and additional development has the potential to bring down tax rates for single family and, you know, the average person, entrepreneur who's running a business on Main Street. And I think that's an important part, but also I think, you know, again, we've had several years of increases, or we've had several years of increases in excess of inflation. And I think it would be pretty great if we could not be facing multiple more years of that.
I don't, can I go ahead?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna interject, you know, as we saw, our undesignated fund balance, you know, is at just about 17%. That does give us, you know, that gives us a margin between that and 15% is about $350,000. So I'm not saying that I'm advocating for taking the undesignated fund balance closer to 15%. But within your guidelines, we could keep things as is. We could buy down the tax rate by $250,000 and still maintain the undesignated fund balance within the guidelines. So that's just, that's the math.
Okay, so that would put us to a 3.3% increase, which is pretty close to inflation, I think.
Right, and, you know, I don't want to do that and hurt us down the road, because I realize that we have some big capital investments that are going to be coming up. But again, you know, like last year I was in the audience and I was paying keen attention to what everybody around me was saying, and that was the message that taxes keep going up and people don't like it. And that the undesignated fund balance was, you know, is fairly large, and you know, we are in excess of where we should be. So those two things together indicate to me that we should look at potentially using the undesignated fund balance and also, taking a good look at our expenses, which I think we did, but there's probably a couple $100,000 in there that we could not spend and not feel a huge impact. The vast majority of Hanover residents probably would not notice at all.
So shall we then plan on coming back on the 24th and, maybe you guys can give us a couple of different scenarios. One, just taking sounds like that's pretty simple math to take it down to 15%, and that gets you 2% buy down on the tax rate. Or alternatively, are there, things that could be cut if necessary? They would have a similar effect. And I guess the third alternative would be, putting less into capital reserves. I'm less excited about that one, but
I'd actually go the third being putting more in the capital reserve, and maybe I'm thinking about investing in the community, and I think the way we become both like fiscally sustainable and environmentally sustainable and serve more people who are underserved now is by making certain smart investments. It's kind of like, my neighbor put in a heat pump and I'm really regretting that I didn't do it at the same time, because now they pay way lower and they're gonna make their money back like way faster than me. And they have like insanely good temperatures in their house. Whereas I have really cold and then really hot, right? And I wear a lot of clothes instead of turning up the heat. But they made that investment and it's paying off. And we have a lot of really smart investments that we can make coming up that will help serve more people and be more sustainable and be cheaper in the long run, that we won't be able to make if we start not planning for them. So I think this idea of sort of staying the course and understanding that we want to invest in our community, that it's not like, oh, should we put a better roof on our house because we don't know if we're going to tear this house down. We want this community to survive and thrive and be sustainable. So I would be if there's too much undesignated fund balance and we're uncomfortable with that, we know we have a slate of projects that are going to pay off in spades if we can just get the capital together now. And I would start doing that. But that's where I stand. So I wouldn't put it as come back with options, just buy down that tax rate or don't invest. That's not where my head's at right now. I think we took this down. We spent a lot of time doing zero-based budgeting, going back and saying okay, let's pull this back and not think about what we did do, but what we should be doing. Let's start from there. So I'm not as, I don't know. That wouldn't be the direction I would give for a third or for
so you're
second.
not a fan of putting less into the building capital reserve fund?
I would be a
You're not
fan
shooting for
of putting potentially more in that capital reserve fund or one of the other capital reserve funds that is going to allow us to do some of the projects that I think are we owe it to the town to invest in.
And increasing taxes. You want to increase it? Is that what you're saying?
No, just
No.
using the undesignated fund differently,
Yeah,
not using it to buy down the tax rate.
Okay.
yeah.
But if we
Instead of
don't use it
having
to buy down the tax
17
rate, then we'll,
Increase the capital reserve. For example, instead of having a 17% undesignated fund balance,
Like,
go to 15% undesignated fund and put that
Yeah.
whatever $1,000 into that building reserve.
Like
So
it's.
that's her opposite direction than
Yeah.
you're wanting to go.
It struck me when, when Pete presented the capital improvement program and then to us at the select board and said, we're spending $50,000, like patching the sidewalks every year, that's minimum. Like, that could be going that could be going into like a plan right now, had we started our plans sooner, right? Like, there's a cost to doing nothing. And and that's why I think it's important to invest. I hope I'm making it clear. I wouldn't frame it as like cut or don't invest. I would.
Right.
If we're gonna touch that undesignated fund balance, which I heard is higher than the 15 because it's recommended, but also because it seems to be extra, unknown, put that way. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
The select board has a written policy, which we can always change, but the current written policy is that undesignated fund balance should either, if we're above what is recommended, and I will have to look it up exactly, because it's on. Then we return it to current, we don't save it for future taxpayers, we return it to current taxpayers, and we do that over, I believe, 2 years is what it's. I could be off on all of that, but that's pretty close to what I think it is. So investing in the future taxpayers is not part of the written policy. And we also have to define, excuse me, Ellen, we also have to define what the undesignated fund balance should be. I mean, that's part of the whole process. I mean, if the state always has been, as long as I've been here, they've been they've been recommending increasing it. We used to have a designated fund balance. 5 to 10 or something. So those two things are really important.
Okay, so sounds like, not to put words in your mouth, that you're maybe leaning a little more toward what Jerry articulated, that, hey, we have some extra money that should go back to the taxpayer. Maybe buy it down to something in line with inflation. We do have a little bit of a.
I'm just observing, and I think we'll have to pull that route, please.
Yeah, I'm looking for it right now.
It does exist. And all of these policies are subject to change. I mean, it's not like it's, holy grail, which I just watched again.
Great flight.
It's the best. Sorry, tend to get off track. But it is what previous select boards have thought, and not necessarily what we think, but it is important to keep in mind.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you. And I think, Jenny, with this, it's a little bit of a different process. There's a little bit of an unexpected windfall, and we are putting it to, and we are investing in it. And so I think it's progress in that direction.
Yeah.
Could it be a little bit more? Could we dial the needle? Maybe, but it's a big step in that direction. And I think I'm also hearing sensitivity toward tax rate versus inflation and how people feel, and we've hit them a number of times now with well above inflation. So how do we strike that balance? So, okay. Finance committee.
Good discussion.
Okay. You don't have to sit at the table now with these microphones. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
okay, so-
exciting.
Yeah. Okay. So you can speak from the bleachers if you
I don't know, we have.
Be careful though, they're very sensitive mics, so if you're whispering back and forth.
So,
Yeah,
I would, John Dolan, I'll speak with my capital improvement program committee hat on.
Please.
I'd venture one comment, and that is that the capital reserve funds are reactive. They respond to specific defined projects that are proposed and for which a detailed cost estimate of some kind has been prepared. Now, those cost estimates could be for few years way in the future, and therefore they're subject to change, but there is some basis of estimate used to fund those capital reserve funds. And I think it's an important discipline that when we put money into the capital reserve funds, we are referring to those cost estimates. We're not putting extra money in because we anticipate there might be future projects that have not yet been defined and presented to the select board or to the capital improvement committee or even to the town manager for consideration. This year, the recommendations of the capital improvement program committee for the capital improvement program, the total dollar value was about 2.2 million. And if you look at the projects that are on the list for the subsequent 5 years, over that 6-year period, it adds up to more than $30 million. So there is on the list of things to come some very high dollar projects, but these are projects that have not yet been worked out in detail. The cost estimates will have to be tested, and I suspect that for some projects that are high dollar, that are say up for consideration and potential funding next year or the year after, we're going to see those implementation dates slip because the detail, the specifics of those projects to justify the cost proposals won't be there immediately. So by definition, the funding of the capital reserve funds is reactive and it's conservative and it's based on what we know about the basis of estimate for these costs now. And we have to remember that they may change significantly in the next few years. And I don't think we want to get ahead of ourselves in funding projects or anticipatory funding of projects for which the estimates could be wildly off or change considerably in the next few years.
John, how much was the Howell Library that was anticipated?
We're talking about $500,000.
1.4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
1.4.
so it's like north of the
with
the
all of the
100,000 that we're putting in. That's all I wasn't suggesting we fund unknown projects.
Right.
I think we have a fair number of known projects that we previously have not saved for, but we know we want to deal with and we want to take care of as a town, right? So
I think there's
Yeah,
two
there's-
components. I'm sorry.
yeah, that was, I didn't know if you were responding to what I said. I was like.
No, I was more responding to the I guess just the reality that I think we as a committee expected this year, the capital improvement program committee, that we would see more significant projects of significant size coming to us, and that didn't happen. And it didn't happen because I think the departments weren't ready to put detailed proposals behind some of these future numbers that are in the capital improvement program. So as a result, our committee can really only opine on what's going to be in front of town meeting for FY26. We couldn't really offer we couldn't offer responsible recommendations on those projects that are on the list for future years at this time.
I just want to acknowledge that the capital reserve is more than just capital projects.
Right.
So there's everything above 100,000 goes to the CIP if it meets their definition, but the capital reserve can be used for those projects that also do not meet that definition. So there's items in there that certainly are vetted by CIP, but the CIPC, but not necessarily all of them.
Could you have by 2 weeks' time, for the next select board meeting, some?
No.
Okay, all right.
I'm on a plane tomorrow.
Okay, yes, no, I know you are. But is it possible to put some, maybe this is Pete, et cetera, something behind this request to put it into the CRF?
I can certainly ask Art to see if he can scratch some numbers based on what he's seen to date.
Yep.
And forecasts what he's expecting on certain buildings. I spent an hour and a half with him on Thursday and recognized that there are significant improvements that should be happening in this building for the current occupants.
So we're sort of up against it in terms of time, John. I recognize what you're saying about process. This is not tonight, but I mean, just in terms of weeks in front of us. This is a little bit of an unusual circumstance that we find ourselves in, having this, you know, I don't want to call it that, but and having it in a pretty short order defined use. So I recognize this is not the orderly process that we've been going through, but it may make good sense in terms of you know, planning resources and you know, trying to avoid bigger tax increases in future years. So yeah, if Art could put something together for 2 weeks' time, that would be helpful.
I'll email him tonight and ask if we can have something the next meeting.
Alan, you can give us a couple different options on how to slice this.
I do want to acknowledge that our obligations and our personnel costs is 3.2% of the budget.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
In terms of an expense
Yeah, we-
driver.
expenses,
Yeah.
they're.
I mean, the increase,
Oh, the increase.
is 3.2%. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and a lot of that is insurance that we
Yeah,
can't
flex
touch with.
benefits.
Flex benefits kill us.
Right, yeah.
I mean, and I
Yeah.
think we would probably be seeing higher rates had a number of long-term employees had retired this year.
I mean, we start with a baseline of a 3.2% increase with that.
Sounds like we're on track to meet again in 2 weeks' time, not to have the public meeting till the following select board meeting,
I will not be at that.
not be at the following select board meeting. Okay.
Right now.
Are others planning to be here?
Wait, what are the
April
dates here?
7th or
April.
something.
So,
I don't know.
hold on.
April 7th.
Wait, when's the next meeting?
The 24th is your next meeting to discuss this and set the public hearing for April 7th.
I can make that one.
And how about April 7th?
I can make that one.
Okay. Others?
I'm in beautiful downtown Buffalo.
Jenny, do you know? 7th? Jerry?
I don't travel.
Okay, you're all here. All
I
right.
have to walk across the street. You fly? Yeah, we've been like.
All right.
Can you fly me to Buffalo for the right price?
Actually.
Okay. Any further comments from Finance Committee / CIPC?
And in preparation for the meeting in 2 weeks. Do you want me to do anything? Do you want me to? I mean,
I
should
mean, we can schedule
should
a
make
public
thoughts
hearing
on
for the 24th.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly will have.
And we
done
can
that,
do
but
2
I
public
don't know.
hearings.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we can skip.
Why
That's
don't we
the-
do
and
that?
often we do 2 public hearings, but in the planning board, we always do.
So you're saying, so that in the event we are all of like mind. we
And
just
can
go
agree,
forward.
we can just go forward.
So
I
the
mean,
other is, okay.
And we're not stuck on April 7th if we can't agree.
Okay.
The April 7th date is a contingency date in case someone submits a petition warrant article that is finance related, which you must hold a public hearing.
Got
it. And the deadline for that, I believe, is the 20th. Could be the 20th, which would mean I haven't included in your budget that you're considering 20.
I mean, does that make sense, you guys? Is schedule the public hearing for the budget on March 24th. We can discuss all of this, or does it have to be set in stone?
No, as long as we post it.
We post it even as it is, and we can adjust to reflect, you know, to discuss the changes, and, you know, that's like the dynamic, transparent process. And if we can't come up with the decision then, we have the 7th as a backup.
Okay, so 24th will be a public hearing.
And April 7th may be a public hearing. If we need
Back
it.
date. Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really now,
For coming.
really thank you now.
Appreciate that. Let's move on to
Good night.
review of Bressett Fund policy. Bob, do you want to walk us through this?
Absolutely. So in your packet, you received the two guidance documents in the language, or the guidance document in the language from the Bressett Fund Trust itself. And you also should have received by separate email a copy of Joe
Yeah.
Driscoll's, Joe Driscoll's review and recommendation. At this point, I just want to set the stage for the opportunity for staff to work with Joe to come up with some guardrails on the Bressett Fund that we can then present to the select board and the trustees of the trust fund for creating clear and concise guidelines as to how this fund can be used and make it easier to access for all. And I want to acknowledge that Joanna has submitted, provided me with a copy of the application process that we should also vet coming for use for outside entities and perhaps town proposals.
Good. Amazing. So, but in terms of budgeting, we needn't identify specific use. We
No.
are budgeting at 230,000, I think is the number. And we can run a process as to,
Should be 360.
It was 131,000 this year, this
This year.
fiscal year, and then around 230 for next fiscal year.
Yeah.
And
we're gonna-
so if we can spend the 100, if we can't spend the 130 this year, we'll roll it over to next year. And we'll have
we need to,
330.
but we need to appropriate the full amount that we're rolling.
by the end of June.
Well,
All right. Or-
No, it needs to be appropriated.
Appropriated
town
in this
meeting.
At town
budget.
meeting.
at town meeting, and
Got
maybe that's the right thing to do, have a public, town meeting, we say, we have 330,000, whatever, for FY 26, that will be, applications are available until such and such a date, I think we should talk about process.
Yeah. The only project that was deemed appropriate, but would be very difficult to pull off by the end of the fiscal year. So I think it's fine to roll it all over because it's a reimbursement, not a allocation.
So would you like me to update the fiscal year 26 budget to take the Bressett from 230 to 360? I could do that. Has no bottom line, no bottom line. Okay, I will do that.
Thank you. Sorry to bring that up.
Oh, no, that's easy.
That's good, that's good catch.
But I think as a board, we should be thinking about what we as a board wanna do, because it's in the board's discretion. It's not the trustees of trust funds discretion on how the funds are allocated, as long as they meet the letter of the trustee. Great.
That's how
Yeah.
I read it all.
Anything further to discuss with respect to Bressett Fund? No. Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to town manager monthly report. Bear with me. Okay.
The first, fire department update, excellent training opportunity, Greensboro Road, the burn was a success. 3 full-time departments were involved in it. And feedback so far has been very positive. For those who haven't seen the results, it's a vacant site now. No, it's cleaned up. It's all cleaned up. Everything's been, today they were on site cleaning it up and it looks, so fire department was grateful for the opportunity to do this burn and Christ Redeemer Church for allowing them to use that building. So thanks goes out to everyone involved. Planning and zoning code update. We've hired a new planning director. Her name is Jen Murray. Jen Murray comes from Middlebury, Vermont, has experience in a college town, has experience in workforce housing, and other components that have a strong match, town-gown relationships. So we're excited to bring her here. She will start on the 28th of April. Our sustainability coordinator has also been hired, Josie. Her last name is escaping me right now. And she will be starting towards the end of April or early May, pending the move from Florida.
Wow, that's big. Congratulations.
Public Works, new hires, Stephen Daly joined the utility technician on February 24th, bringing utility heavy equipment and CDLA experience. Vacancies, light and heavy duty equipment operator, we have one. The hiring process is underway and interviews have started. And we have a vacancy created by the resignation of Tyler Nelson. Recruiting is underway. Training, we have Ryan Holman attending a free CDL training in Vermont. Typically, we spend up to $9,000 to send somebody to this, and Vermont has given us the opportunity to participate in their program. Utility division responded to 8 water main breaks. This was before Wednesday. And some of the Wednesday failures were, exercise trying to use the valves to isolate the break down in front of CBS, caused another valve to fail, which caused another valve to fail. And the big hiccup was that the flow under the pavement was such that we were starting to undermine the road. And an emergency decision was made at 5:20 to shut the water off instead of 11 p.m. at 6:20 p.m. And our staff went door to door. It's interesting that we have 2 water lines in Main Street. The east side was not impacted, the west side was, and some residential neighborhoods were. Some of the residential neighborhoods, what we didn't know they were impacted until we found out after the fact.
What did Stephen think of his choice to come here right now?
Yeah. No, it was a long couple of days, and they pulled off.
And in some respects underscores the need for the mapping project.
Yeah.
It sounds like,
So the LED utility light replacement, federal funds on funding unlikely, but Liberty reimbursement, New Hampshire Save rebate could cover the remaining cost. The Long Island Sound Futures Fund, $1.5 million grant, unfrozen, but no update on the reimbursement. This goes to the water reclamation plan upgrade. New Hampshire DES medium general permit. We are having to deal with some costs there, an additional $25,000 in dealing with this adaptive plan that's been required of us by New Hampshire DES permit process.
What does the P stand for?
It's a typo.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right, so it's New Hampshire
That's why-
Department of
that's
Environmental
That's why I
Services?
paused twice. Sorry. Infrastructure and maintenance, 40% complete on the water meter upgrade. Postcards have been mailed and door-to-door visits are underway. Other matters, road bans, we're gonna put the road bans in shortly as the temps start to rise to protect our roads from heavy truck traffic. That'll happen at DPW. We'll make sure that you're included on the notice so that you're aware when it goes into place. CPCNH, there's a change in leadership. Henry Herndon has been appointed acting general manager as of March 1st, and the key links are provided for CPCNH in the document. Staffing at the police department update. Jim Martin was promoted as police chief after our process. Mike Scabola was promoted to captain internally effective March 2nd and is taking over the CALIA accreditation process. Ignace Amaris has been hired from Dallas. A lateral starts the 17th. Oh, I knew this was gonna happen. I have a cheat sheet. Jake McCantono is starting, and Henry too will start the academy on May 5th. And a fourth candidate is in the process. The earliest academy will be September. So we're excited about these appointments. Upcoming promotions, internal announcement for the second lieutenant's position created by the vacancy with Mike stepping up, and a corporal vacancy will be coming soon. Additionally, we have two candidates for communications officers who've completed the written exam and are in the interview process. And they're planning a job fair in March at Plymouth State and Norwich University to recruit additional communications officers. They have an outreach and community engagement, the Josie's Blood Drive donation event that they're working on in March, and the HPD, The Voice video series launching soon. Planning in the future, future events, planning a mock active shooter exercise in July at Dartmouth College with Dartmouth Safety and Security, Emergency Management, Hanover Phi, and monthly meetings, tabletop meetings are underway to get this off in a successful way, and expanding partnership with regional agencies, including tabletop exercises. So that concludes the town manager's report.
Thank you, Rob. Just congratulations to all involved in recruiting and bringing in. I mean, you went through a whole bunch of positions. It's remarkable. So that's fantastic, and welcome to all those folks. And that makes such a huge difference to have close to a full staff.
I think the chief informed me that this was the first time in almost 10 years the department has had its full staff.
Wow, it's terrific.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know what,
Congratulations.
like, what's changed? Is it just leadership or is it?
We spoke about handshake, they're using handshake, in colleges. They talked about reaching out to people who had previously been on the force and where they came from to, like, basically send. Yeah, you could probably fill us in more, like.
You weren't expecting to speak, were you?
Like, yeah,
I was away for a year, so there was definitely been some changes since I've been back.
Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was very surprised to come back to essentially being full staffed and having people in the process, because prior we were pretty short, working a lot of overtime, so.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Which I like the overtimes.
There's that. I mean, it's not, but it must be nice to have a full set of colleagues.
No, I think there's the support of the select board and the changes that have happened across the board really, and we're also very selective in how we bring people on to make sure they fit the community and the culture, so that we're successful across the board. And it's a team effort, and grateful for everybody that's been involved from start to finish. Police have done an excellent job expanding the way their outreach, and the handshake is a particularly interesting one that even the team we hired to do the recruiting process for the chief was unaware of and took notes on that process. So it's quite successful.
Terrific. Let's move on to business requiring action. The first item of which is recommendation to set a public hearing on Monday, March 24 and April 7. If needed, I think we're going to recommend both. And there is motion language in the packet on Rob's first memo to select board members, which is page.
I move to set a public hearing on Monday, March 24th, 2025, and Monday, April 7th, if needed for review and approval of the FY 2026 budget.
second,
All the comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Second item of which is consideration of the draft fire department union contract. And Rob, thank you for all your efforts on this as well. Can you walk us through, I know you sent around the document, but maybe just highlight the changes relative to the status quo.
Absolutely. The first is that it was stamped draft because I hadn't received full review from council, but this is the formal language. There'll be some formatting changes, spaces in the right location and everything else. So the first change is the fire department signed an agreement that that did not match the other two unions nor the non-union staff. This will bring them this will put them at parity with the balance of the departments with regards to the cost of living increases that happen annually in July, which was fixed in their original contract at 2%. So they will be eligible if adopted for a 3.4% increase July 1st if this budget is approved. The second was they, as part of the negotiation process, were not provided the dental plan or the HSA funding that was provided to all other employees. The third was a change in the bereavement policy. The bereavement policy now provides some flexibility that was not in the original contract language. They had to use it within 7 days of the death of a family member or they would lose it. This takes into consideration the way funerals and celebrations of life are scheduled, especially for large families or 70 families all over, and provides for up to a year for this bereavement to be used. And I think that it also memorializes that we are no longer going to be offering an insurance plan or cannot offer an insurance plan after July 1 because it's no longer available. And only one member of the town is on it, happened to be a firefighter. Questions?
Questions? No, thank you for,
That's huge to all be on the same page.
yes.
Fire, police.
All union and non-union.
Yeah.
And I'd ask if the board were so inclined as to make the motion.
I move to approve the draft of the fire department union contract.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, and please extend our gratitude to the fire department as well. Two maybe related items, acceptance of grant agreement from the state of New Hampshire to purchase mobile data terminals for 2 police cruisers replacing models. There was very extensive documentation around.
No kidding, it's like, maybe we should all just write a check. For it was like, what, $7,000 grant and a 25-page
Yes.
application, not even application, just rules to
Just-
follow.
So we should.
There's a requirement that you authorize the town manager to sign the grants and that be documented at the meeting and memorialized in the minutes. So I ask that you approve this and authorize the town manager to enter into the grant agreement.
I move to accept the grant agreement from the state of New Hampshire to purchase mobile data terminals for 2 police department cruisers and to authorize the town manager to sign the appropriate documentation.
Second. All right, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, the Moose Plate Grant. Super preserving, where is that book from 1761? Is that in your office?
It's down in the vault.
Okay, all right. You get that digitized, all right, so.
So Tracy Walsh made application for and received approval subject to the same criteria that was outlined a minute ago for a grant of $7,694 to preserve some of our town clerk archive records, old records. And with that, I would ask the board accept the grant and authorize me to sign the documents as necessary to enter into the grant agreement.
I move to accept the state of New Hampshire Library Moose plate grant and authorize our town manager to sign appropriate documents.
Okay, second.
I'll second that.
Okay, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Consider affirming the resolution strongly, let's see, objecting to the freezing of federal grant programs to states. Did all of you have a chance to read through the motion language? I know this is similar to what other communities have put forward. Are there any comments that these members might wish to make on this? No?
I'd say I've heard from several people in support of this, that not when they didn't know this was on here, started contacting me. I think as soon as Lebanon adopted it, they're like, are you guys gonna do this? So it seemed it's at least important to the people who reached out.
And sustainability members are the ones that proposed it, the sustainability committee members.
Yeah.
Originally, like.
Yeah, I've heard
yeah.
from the sustainability
Yep.
people, and then I've heard from other people as well.
Rob, you have two suggested motions, I believe.
Yep.
Should we go through them in succession?
Yes, please. The first is to adopt the proposed resolution, and the second is to work to organize additional support.
Okay. Jen, would you care to put this forward?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Or did you want to do it, Chair?
So you,
Athens? I move that the Hanover Select Board hereby adopts this resolution objecting to the freezing of federal grant programs to states, municipalities, and organizations that support Hanover residents as presented.
Second. Jared, none.
Yes,
Second, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
I always think you're seconding when you say something.
Yeah.
That's
You
right.
can, can't,
No, I
you can.
Of course, you can make motions, you can do anything.
You can do anything as a chair.
All right.
When you guys were slow last year, I used to do it myself all the time.
Okay, I move that the Hanover Select Board shall seek additional support for this resolution from other New Hampshire municipalities and organizations in an effort to build as broad a coalition as possible prior to forwarding the resolution to the named representatives no later than April 1st, 2025.
I second. Nice.
Very good, Carrie.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Yay,
All
Carrie.
right, wow, look at that. Okay, thank you, Rob. All right, approval of February 24 select board minutes.
I'll move to approve the February 24th, 2025 select board minutes as written.
They were nice. They were nicely done.
Second, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, all right. Okay, we have come to select board reports.
From the downtown group, we got a proposal for a public art policy.
Oh,
So we have Kieran Campion leads our public art key objective. And he took a bunch of examples from Portsmouth and a couple other communities, put it together to create our own public art policy. He's looking for an individual who wants to really take the lead on public art in town. And not only work on this policy some more, but also bring in more public art. So that will come to the select board eventually. And
So it's a proposed policy for the town.
it is,
All right.
yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and you know, it covers a lot of different stuff, but we're looking for, you know, a level of I can't think of all the words in it, but you know, things should match, or it should be themed, that type of stuff. We need a method for approval. We need some guidelines for kind of what those themes are gonna be, and maybe some of the things that are off limits. And so that will eventually come to play. Parking committee, so Jim Rubens is leading up this parking committee. There's a meeting, I think next week, maybe. And he's working with the PD guys and the parking division to just try to make parking better in Hanover. this summer, we're gonna have a full-time student that is working for our group, working mostly on marketing and PR. And then lastly, we heard from Dave Anderson about his wayfinding and signage proposal that he made to the planning board, which I'm sure Jenny will talk about here in a minute. And it sounds great.
Don't really have anything to report. I did go attend the school district meeting. I think everything passed. All the articles. Jenna?
Nothing to report.
Jenny?
Can you make sure I have this date right? It's Saturday, April 26th, or the, okay, because I wrote 3 to 5, so I said April 3rd. Anyway, Saturday, April 26th. Earth Day celebration. It's gonna be at Richmond Middle School. 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. I think the like conservation committees coming, Sustainable Hanover is doing, a bunch of people are coming. It's gonna be a great event. You should all go. The planning board, had the first public hearing for zoning amendments. So that is moving. Some of those are moving forward right now. We did hear from the sign ordinance, that hasn't advanced to a public hearing yet. But the one that did is about, it's basically about New Hampshire, wants everyone to fulfill their obligation to provide housing. So based on the regional study that was done in our area, as it's written in our master plan, we're like on the hook to develop these 800 units and to do so in a way that's fiscally responsible and sustainable. So our master plan points us in the direction of developing along water and sewer, which basically lets us keep this small town rural feel and preserve open space while allowing for infill housing. So the town staff have put forward this amendment that the planning board's been working on, which basically allows for 2-family, 3-family, and 4-family dwelling along water and sewer. And what I found really interesting, just like looking at the history, is we already have like these units all over town. And particularly in some of our more walkable neighborhoods, like the West End, but even like around Occam Pond or where a bunch of Dartmouth faculty live. And they basically look like houses, I'm gonna get the name wrong. It's called like house-sized residential dwelling. Is the name of the zoning amendment. And we have basically these lots all over Hanover already. And this would basically allow them to be created again. Because in the interim between when zoning was first allowed, and I think I traced it back to the 90s, when we changed it. We flipped it so that basically since 2010, 80% of our new houses have been second homes. This is sort of part and parcel of how we've allowed things to be built. But sort of by re-legalizing this thing that used to exist, we can allow for basically small scale infill housing. So there'll be at least 2 more discussions. If people are interested, that's Tuesday, March 24th. No, sorry, Tuesday, March 18th and April 1st. Is that right? Not April Fool's Day, is it?
Yes.
Oh, it's April Fool's Day. Okay. Yeah, so those 2 are coming up. And that's like that was a big thing. And there's some other, there's one about workforce housing, just to make sure that that's not impacted, that for not-for-profit workforce housing, just to make sure that's on pace. I don't know, maybe you could speak to that.
So
I'm not as,
Yeah, so the goal with the workforce housing ordinance was to try to remove one of the barriers in the ordinance, which is the special exception requirement. And the second was to make sure that it mirrored the proposed overlay district, so that it wasn't more restrictive than the proposed language in the ordinance that Jenny just spoke about. So that's moving forward also.
I thought there was one more.
No, it's a sign ordinance. Was the-
Okay, but that was still being talked about.
Yep, the sign ordinance from the college. Wayfinding signage.
Yeah, and then. I don't think we have anything super worth reporting right now from Hanover Bike Walk. People are excited to work on a bunch of different things. They're excited about the TIF district. They're excited about talking about e-bikes and e-scooters as always. Yeah. So we just had that one, so I didn't organize. That was today. So it should be really fresh, but it's we just like covered a lot. We've been working on our walk audits so that we can do those more easily and kind of open it up so other people can do the walk audits and simplify that. And we updated, thanks to the Hanover Police have really updated their systems. So their reporting systems are like top notch. And as a result, we're able to get the data on sometimes a quarterly basis, but at least every year, but often now quarterly. So that we can update our crash maps, which is cool. So all of the crashes with between vehicles and pedestrians, which includes scooters, and vehicles and bicyclists are mapped on the Hanover website, and they have been for like the past 2 decades, but now we can do it. Now we have like the last 4 years are up there too, which will help guide some of our shared street work, and help us identify any hot spots and other patterns. That's exciting. And not because I asked them to, but the Regional Planning Commission started mapping all crashes, which is super cool because I think they're up to 2021. Because now we can also see where all the car crashes are. We don't map, there's a lot more just, you know, either car on object or car on car smash ups than there are with humans, thankfully. Anyway, but
I'll way to phrase it, but yeah.
I mean, there are humans in them, but they're more protected. They're more protected, yeah, because the ones with the people outside the car are more impactful. But that's like another way we can see, you can kind of see where the crashes are. And they code it too, so we can actually see where the animal corridors are, so you can see where the animals are hit. Yeah, all kind of great stuff.
Great job. You think of any going on?
No, we do not.
We know it's not, okay, all right. So we need just motion to adjourn, there's a little bit more to sign there, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay,
I move you adjourn.
Good second.
second, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, and appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Yes.
Thanks, Nick.
Yes.